It is like writing music in a way. The tune isn't done by me, the tune is what people write. I do the sound. A sentence is a sentence is a sentence. And a tune is a tune is a tune, but whether you play the tune on the banjo or the piano, or whether you sing it, or whether a girl sings it or a man sings it, makes it sound different. And that's what I do. I add the sound. I don't change it. An A is an A and a B is a B. I can't go too far away from it. But once I have that sort of like the general character, then I just sketch. I use just a very, very rough 2B pencil and do sort of smallish sketches that aren't very good, but to me they're a little exercise. I don't go into detail, I just patch a few things, and then I start sketching, and once the sketches kind of look like they need to do for me, then I do 1 or 2 or maybe 4 or 5 characters, and there's an A and an N and an E and an S, sometimes a G, and that defines the character. And I do those fairly nicely, they're not artwork, and then I sit down with one of my professional type designers who will then turn that into data. And I have a second method which is even more realistic. If I find something that I really like, that I think would work for the client, but it's already used by somebody else, or it's too old, or I can't afford to buy it, or whatever, or it would be a rip-off, then I look at that for a long time. I look through the books and I draw it and I sketch over it, and then I put it away, and then the next day I sit down and draw it from memory. And then it's different, obviously. I read a novel and I rewrite it the next day in my own language. It'd be the same story, but it'll be different words and it had a slightly different feel about it. So that's how I do with typefaces. The stuff we did for the Deutsche Bahn, we looked at Sabo and the typeface by Tschichold, which they used a lot, which I never liked very much. But we looked at it for a while, Christian in New York and myself. And then I sat down and actually drew it from memory. And it looked totally different, because in the meantime, Christian had sent me stuff that he'd been designing. So all these images came together in my head. And what I sketched was what I thought looked like Zabor, but when I looked at Zabor, it was totally different. So it was original. So it's influenced by it, but it's not a copy. And it's maybe osmosis, whatever it's called. And I think that's pretty much how everybody works, because I mean, everybody is influenced by somebody else. If you sit down and you write a tune, you have all the other tunes in your life in your head. And it's very difficult to write another tune that isn't already known. And I'm sure I've done stuff where I've inadvertently copied something else because I've seen it somewhere. It comes back out into your brain maybe 20 years later. I like to take things apart and put them together, and I like to know how things work, whatever it is, whether it's a camera or a piece of printing or whatever. And I think that's the combination now, that without letters we wouldn't exist. There would be no knowledge, there would be no science, there would be no history. And I find it fascinating that I use words like everybody else. I write words, but I go a little deeper. I go into the letters. So to me it's inseparable, they're totally combined. So the physical fascination of the letter shape is the same as the fascination I have from writing. I love reading different languages, and I like how they look differently. So to me, it's the same thing. It's all language, the physical and the visual shape of language. People are reading way more than we ever did, because on the internet what people do is read. You look at images, you look at videos, but most of the time you read. Even if it's 140 letters in Twitter, or short emails, we read way more than we ever did. And what's happening is what's always happened. We develop in separate languages. There was always a language of science, which used to be Latin. The language of diplomacy was French. The language of the post office was French. The language of the explorers was English. The language of science was German after Latin, until the First World War. If you're in communication, you have to know Twitter, which is a separate language. You have to express yourself. You may use those little signs. So I think they just add up. I don't think anything is going to be reduced. There is a Twitter language, there is an internet language, there's going to be an iPad language, there will be all these separate languages. As we will have black and white photography, color photography, I think we're just getting more and more rather than getting them all fusing together. My life's work isn't what I've done, but it's the people that I've influenced. I find much more satisfaction. I think that's what I got the prize for, is for having trained or educated, a few hundred people over the last 40 years. I've trained people, I've hired people, I've worked with people. There is a list of about 500 people who've got their own studios. If you go to any studio in Berlin, you probably won't find one where there isn't somebody who's worked with me. The same even goes in London and other places. So I've had an influence because of the phase and the age, and when I started this, I brought corporate design back from England, which didn't exist in Germany. In that sense, I invented pretty much with FontShop the distribution of electronic typefaces, of fonts. So that's sort of, I was lucky to be there at the right time. I've done a few things on my own. Most things I've done with other people. So for me, my responsibility is to show people that this is always teamwork. There are no geniuses, there's no single incredible people who do all this, as Michelangelo and he had assistants too. That this work is by definition a work in teams, a cooperative, and that it's important that now and again we can do things that will change the place we live in. So in my exhibition I will feature the work that we did for the BVG here in Berlin, the transit people, because that has a profound influence on the city that I live in. And it's design work. But we were very lucky that we had unification of Berlin. I had a client that understood this, and that won't happen again. That happened 20 years ago. We were able to change the look of Berlin, and the same goes for the work I did for Deutsche Bahn, for the railways, that you are lucky to be at a certain place in a certain time, and you can have a major influence on the visual culture of your country. Issue has always been to try and improve things that are in the public domain. You mentioned architecture, but that's down to clients. The architects, we have great architects, we have great designers, we have great engineers, we don't have clients. So what we need is a culture of clients, and there's still horrible government communications. I mean, if I look at the tax forms, they're just as bad as they were 40 years ago. And I could make them 100 times better in 2 days, but they don't realize it's something that people can do. They go to the advertising agencies, and the advertising agencies aren't interested in forms. They do big campaigns. And if they came to me, I would do the form, not a campaign. But the clients, we still need to educate the clients, because a lot of communication, and the reason I'm saying is not I want this to be aesthetically nicer, but I want communication to be more open. And if, for example, bad government forms serve to separate us from the government, because they make us stupid, because we don't understand, so we do what we're told. If things were more designed in the sense of more open or more accessible, then we would be able to communicate more with each other. So sometimes I understand that government, whatever, the state, the administration, the system itself doesn't really want to communicate, because then it becomes messy and dirty, and we're supposed to shut up and make our little crosses and fill our forms and be quiet. And that's why I think designers should be. They should be in there trying to break things open. The famous example was, the ballots in Florida, when I almost said Nixon, when Bush got elected the second time, the hanging chads and all that shit. The forms were so bad that people voted for the wrong president. And it was down to 8,000 votes that Bush became president for the second time, which is nothing. Because the forms were so bad, they didn't know where to put the bloody crosses. So they voted for an arsehole, and who started the war. So I mean, it's quite incredible that sometimes graphic design can change lives. We're very sophisticated. I mean, the Western society, certainly Germany, we've always had very high standards of the technical parts. Germany has always had the best printing and the best typesetting in the world, because we invented it. And to this day, the three major German printing machine manufacturers, Heidelberg, König Bauer and Mann Roland, dominate 85% of the world market. So we still make the machines that make the printed stuff. And we make the cameras, a lot of them, and we make the optics. So we have this tradition of supplying the tools to make visual culture, as it were. And that shows. All our work technically has always been on a higher level, maybe not conceptually. Conceptually, we've always looked to New York or London or even the Netherlands or whatever. and sometimes Italy. But now I see that once we've got the technical issues down, that people are becoming so eclectic that I can hardly tell the difference anymore between something that happens in Berlin or New York or London or Australia, because the designers are so in tune with each other. They travel, half the people in our studio are from somewhere else. And wherever I go, we speak, well, of course now we speak English, but we also speak the same visual language. Doesn't mean we do the same stuff, but I don't really see different types of standards anymore. Now the difference are more in the dialect, that people speak different dialects, visual dialects, and it's fascinating. Well, type is all about rhythm and space. It's actually not about form very much. You look at the rhythm and the contrast of the word. A word has, it's a certain down and across. There's thick stroke and thin strokes. There's round ones and square ones. There's double L's and there's O's, and that every word has a rhythm. It's like looking at a park or at a building. You don't see the details. You see all of it. And in a good building, the eyes of the building, the windows will make a nice pattern that you remember. It's like your eyes or my eyes. It has a face, and a typeface, that's why it's called face, luckily in English, has a face. It all combines together. And what we read is the contrast between thick and thin, light and dark, square and round. And the rhythm is the rhythm of words, of spaces between words, of spaces between characters. And just as in music, that makes it exciting. If it was just the notes, without any meter, any timing, every tune would sound the same. So my role is to put rhythm into it. The contrast between the outside shape and the inside shape. The outside is the black, and the white inside is actually what? It's like the pauses in music. The stuff when there isn't anything playing, that makes the rhythm. And the silence in between. And the silence in between is what you actually design, rather than the black notes. You can't become a good designer by staying at home and looking at one book. You've got to be out, talk to other people, travel, because there's nothing better than realizing that 200 kilometers from your door, things are different. Because you live in wherever you live, whether it's Berlin or New York or the middle of nowhere, or the suburbs of Beijing. Things are different when you move out. And that's the first thing when you're 21 years old. Oh my God, it doesn't have to be blue. It doesn't have to be square. It can be different. Read as much as you can. Listen to as much as you can, travel as much as you can, meet as many people as you can. Just gather all the shit for years and years. And when you think your head is almost full, then you start over, because your head is very, very empty. My head is empty, even though it feels full at times, but I'm sure I've only got 10% of my brain capacity using. I could use a hell of a lot more of it. Our brain is incredible. It's the biggest hard drive we know, and it's the fastest. But the trouble is I can never find anything, like on my hard drive.